Thank you very much. And welcome to Cats and Dogs here on Press TV with me, Lambert Topic. And we begin with a look at the latest on the French Revolution, Macron style. Every time people in France pour out onto the streets to protest against the soaring cost of living, energy crisis, coronavirus, pandemic policies, housing, racism, poverty, police brutality, human rights, women's rights, and everything else, Emmanuel Macron has a brilliant explanation for all of the problems. He blames the one man apparently in control of French politics, that enfant terrible, Vladimir Putin. But people know much of the real blame lies with the French president himself. In mid-January, a dozen people with links to a French far-right group went on trial accused of plotting to assassinate Macron. Prosecutors say 13 members of the Bajol group conspired to engineer a putsch which involved a plan for an attack on Macron during a public appearance in 2018. But the so-called plot never came to anything. The accused seemingly held dissenting views on the government. Well, if that's a reason to put people on trial, most of the French population should end up in French courts too. But do these revelations really mean they intended to make an attempt on the life of the head of state? What do people think of the assassination plot? Is France losing patience with Macron? Meanwhile, the French president has filed a complaint against a clairvoyant called Delphine Jagous, alias Amandine Roy, on the social networks, for apparently sharing a poster of him in which Macron is in the guise of Adolf Hitler with the slogan, "Obey, get vaccinated." Macron really hates this poster. What's surprising is that the clairvoyant didn't see the court case coming. Presumably, she'll only go ahead with the court case if her crystal ball tells her she's going to win. A couple of years ago, Macron sued a billboard owner after he originally mounted a similar anti-Macron poster on 2 billboards. Michel Ange Fleury, the owner, was sentenced to a €10,000 fine. That's $5,000 per billboard. But this time, instead of suing the clairvoyant, he should get her to make predictions. She can't be any worse at that than his economics minister, who apparently didn't predict the cost of living crisis currently crippling France. But if you think that France has failed the test of tolerance for satire, you're totally wrong. Macron has already proved he's game for a laugh. In 2020, for example, French President Emmanuel Macron said it's not his place to pass judgment on the editorial choice of a journalist or newsroom, never, because we have freedom of the press. And he was talking about Charlie Hebdo wanting to republish cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. So by freedom of the press, he means say what you like, as long as it's not about him. Rock on, Emmanuel. Recently, Macron has raised the alarm about another French factor that's getting too old and too rare. General practitioners or doctors. Nearly 7 million people in France don't have a referring GP. There are now more GPs in France retiring than new ones setting up practice. France now has 318 doctors per 100,000 people, which is less than Ethiopia and Russia. Who can he blame? Putin for stealing all our doctors. Probably. But France is facing a glaring reality. It's getting older, which means healthcare needs to be growing. So what can Macron do to fix the shortage of GPs in the country? Let's ask the French president himself. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to Cats and Dogs, Emmanuel Macron. Mr. President, welcome to Cats and Dogs.
Cats and Dogs? Is there now a shortage of vets as well?
No, it's just the name of the show. But how will you fix the shortage of doctors?
We have a modern solution to getting more doctors.
A modern solution. What is that solution?
We are looking on Amazon and eBay and China. And if we pay for Amazon Prime, they'll all arrive tomorrow. Problem solved.
But are there enough incentives to become a doctor in France? A fingernail technician gets 30 euros in Paris, while a doctor gets 25 euros per visit.
That's different. Even as president, I cannot earn as much as a nail technician.
Why not?
Because a nail technician has a more useful skill than I do. That's Putin's fault, by the way.
Okay, well, leaving the Putin thing aside, how do you intend to fix the doctor shortage?
Amazon Prime will deliver them the next day.
Okay, but if for some reason Amazon Prime doesn't deliver a load of doctors, what will you do?
In that case, we'll rejuvenate the old doctors.
What do you mean, rejuvenate the old doctors?
We'll use Botox and modern hair treatments.
With respect, that won't work.
Yes, it will. It worked for me.
But if it doesn't work?
Then I'll blame Putin.
That was French President Emmanuel Macron. Anyway, just in case his ambitious rejuvenation project fails, Cats and Dogs would like to suggest a Macron plan B, C and D. Step down before it's too late. Do absolutely nothing. Then wait and see if the problem fixes itself. Invade a country. Create a refugee crisis and let the doctors into France. On humanitarian grounds, of course. While Macron's France has a GP shortage, it's certainly not short of prisoners. French prisons reached record levels of inmates last year, with over 72,000 people behind bars, despite there being only around 61,000 places. The French Ministry of Justice released these statistics in November, confirming prison occupancy reached 120% of capacity. This overpopulation has led to a decline in prison standards, with over 2,000 prisoners having to sleep on mattresses on the floor. French inmates complain of filthy living circumstances and incessant noise in conditions so poor they match those of a typical home in Britain. In fact, a few years ago, the European Court of Human Rights condemned prison conditions in France. If you're thrown in a prison like the Shawshank State Penitentiary, all you need to get out is a hammer and a series of posters, perhaps of Macron. But that only works for a spacious cell with 1 or 2 prisoners in it. Oh yes, if it's time to do time in France where personal space is non-existent, don't make your cellmates angry. And don't ask them why they're in prison. Getting a good night's sleep is harder if you know you're surrounded by serial killers and violent repeat offenders. But if, on the other hand, you're asked why you're behind bars, you might get more peace and quiet if you say something like, "I didn't know cannibalism was a crime, even in the cost of living crisis." And if you miss the world outside, remember it's cold, expensive, and full of never-ending protests. So enjoy your free, warm place, food, and a lot of company, whether you want it or not. That's all for this week. Join me again next time to hear the latest on the 21st century French Revolution, the 20th century French health service, and the out-of-date French president's excuses. That's all on Press TV with me, Lemon Topic, and Cats and Dogs.